Alright.
And is there any public here to be heard tonight?
Did you get
No.
any, okay.
None.
So I think Kim, it's good to state that we don't have a quorum present.
Okay, so there's currently no quorum present. So we won't be making any decisions tonight unless that should change.
Oh, wait, no, if Crystal's on there,
Jeffrey.
No, we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, and Kim is 5. Yes.
then we do have quorum.
Oh, we have quorum, never
Okay,
mind, we
yeah.
can't make decisions.
Yes, we can, yeah. So yeah, if we have 5 folks, we can make quorum.
So, I didn't attend the last meeting, so I'm not able to vote. Can we still do that with 4 voting members?
I think you can, and if we have to come back and revote, we'll talk to city clerk.
Okay,
I think as long as you have quorum and the majority votes, because it's not a consensus, it's a majority.
okay,
So if 3 of the 4 vote for it, then we can approve the minutes.
okay, so should we make a motion then to?
Yeah, we need somebody to make a motion.
I motion.
Okay, Crystal motions.
Second. Can I second?
No, like
No,
you can't
I
abstain. So we need somebody else to second.
I'll second, Jeffrey.
Alright,
All in favor, please raise your hand to approve the minutes from last meeting.
you can use it electronically too, if you're not on camera.
Did you see everybody, Brenda?
No, but did everybody, I see Cassie.
Okay, Crystal raised her hand electronically.
Okay. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Um,
You just need 3.
Alright.
And you're gonna abstain from the vote because you weren't there.
Present.
Alright, great. So now we can go on with the presentations.
Great,
Alrighty.
thanks. I'll
go ahead,
I'll
Christy, go
start
ahead.
with I'll start with a little intro and then I'll pass it off to Katie, who's the real expert. But good evening, board members. I'm Christy Wiseman. I'm the Housing Investment Manager, and I want to start with a little update on the HCI side of things. So thank you for all your work in the May and June HHSAB meetings in helping us go through our HCI funding applications. We took those recommendations that we showed you in your June meeting to City Council on June 25th, and we got City Council's approval on all of our projects. So we're very excited to start writing contracts for all the projects to do some really important housing work. And as part of that funding package that we presented to Council on June 25th was a pilot program for a locally funded down payment assistance program. So we already have a down payment assistance program in place that our division has been running, but it's funded by federal funds and it's really kind of hard to use. And so there's been desire for a little bit now to craft our own locally funded program where we can make the rules a little bit more relevant to Longmont residents and get more folks into homeownership. So Katie Silvis is our homeownership program specialist, realtor, homeowner knowledge extraordinaire, and she is going to present our overview of what we're thinking about for this program. And just a housekeeping note, as I mentioned to Eliberto, we don't need a vote on this. This is really an informational item for you as the board. We are wanting your input and your feedback on what we're thinking. We will be taking information about our program and what we're thinking for program guidelines to City Council in a study session in August. So if you're interested, you're welcome to attend that. But again, this is just kind of preliminary thoughts on how the program might look, and we don't need a formal vote tonight, but really happy and excited to hear your input. So with that, I'll pass it off to Katie.
Thank you, Christy. Good evening, board members. Thanks for having me. So the thing that some of the things that we're running into with the Boulder County Assistance Program that the City of Longmont administers is that the requirements for this program just aren't working, especially given that we're seeing a lot more applicants this year than we have recently in the last couple of years. And I've been able to get very few people through eligibility all the way through. We've got some people who are close, but we just haven't really been able to get there, except for one individual who was our first person since 2017 to successfully close with the down payment assistance program. Reasons for that are the way that income and assets are calculated with the federal requirements. Because of the funding source on that, it's very strict in what it can count, how it counts it. And then the program itself just has some requirements that once we really get into the weeds with it with somebody, they may decide that it's really not for them. And so what we're proposing is a locally funded program, which we're seeing a lot of our peers, not only in the area, but across the state doing. So just to give you an idea, in the last few years, we had 18 applicants in 2020. We had 14 applicants in 2023. This year, we've had 23, and I've got one more since this was drafted and sent out to you. So really 24 applications this year. Only one person's qualified. And like I said earlier, that one person also closed. So the locally funded program would be something funded outside of our HUD home disbursement that we have. This program will be mostly based off of what we have with our current Boulder County program, with some of the same guidelines, so that we are maintaining some consistency with the expectation of who it is serving. But we're hoping we can be flexible on a couple of things. So this would be a 1-year pilot program that serves buyers at or below 80% AMI within the city of Longmont. So that's anybody within the city limits. We're asking for a one-time allocation of $250,000 from the Affordable Housing Fund. Down payment amount would be up to 5% of the purchase price with a maximum of $40,000. The qualification period, once someone is eligible, is good for 6 months. So I'm not a lender, I'm not a loan officer. So being able to keep up on someone's income on a monthly basis is just going to be a lot more work than we need for this program. So 6 months at a time is what we're recommending. And this will be anyone, or for any home, that's either new construction or already exists within the city. Requirements that we would like to be a little flexible are the $25 application fee just for staff time. It takes at minimum about 6 hours to get all the way through one application, and that's if they've turned everything in perfectly and I have everything that I need. Usually it takes quite a bit longer than that. They must contribute $2,000 of their own money towards the home purchase. They must qualify for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage with no adjustable rates, so it's got to be fixed. The primary residency requirement with yearly, so this must be their primary home with yearly verification of occupancy that we'll ask them for, and then their assets cannot exceed $25,000, with the exception of retirement accounts. And so this is a good example of what I see people struggling with, is that they'll have assets if there's someone who's been in the workforce for a while. They may have retirement accounts, but our current down payment assistance program requires that all assets be liquidated down to a maximum of $25,000 at the time of closing. So for anybody about the age of 40 or over, if they have that in a retirement account that they can't normally access, the program requires that they liquidate that down. And I've got an application right now for a woman who's in her 60s and she's nearing retirement, wants to buy a home. And this program is asking her to liquidate all of her retirement to buy the home. And it's not fair to anybody, in my opinion, that's been working, that's over, the age of 40, someone who's been in the workforce for a few decades and has a decent retirement amount, but they're not using that. That's not for purchasing a home, that's for them to live on. So we're just asking that assets, anything outside of their retirement, be liquidated to that amount. So that's going to be any stock, any gifts that they may have received from parents or family, things like that. And then they must complete financial counseling prior to closing, which is consistent with all of our other programs that we have. The terms for the loan, it's going to be a 2% annual interest rate for 30 years. We're recommending that this be deferred, but we can do a monthly loan option. Deferred just seems a little bit easier since, again, these are serving folks 80% and below. With the price of homes and things that we're seeing, we think that a deferred option is going to be a little easier on everyone. And so to take a look at it from the numbers perspective, the figure that we're using for our purchase price is $319,500. And that's a figure we're getting from the house pad project. So we know that there's going to be homes in that price range that are going to be built specifically for this group of folks anyway. We know that those are coming. So when we were looking at how to assist them and what the best, what's the push and pull of the figures and how do we set it up, the minimum down payment requirement for any loan, whether that's conventional or subsidized, here is 3.5%. So they have to come up with 3.5% of the price of their home regardless. That down payment assistance range is anywhere from $9,100 down to $14,000 with a monthly mortgage payment of about $2,000, and that's assuming a 620 credit score. And so we use that as our baseline, and that will help us with roughly 17 people. If we bump that down payment assistance amount up to 5%, that gets us in the $12,000 to $18,000 range, keeping their payment just under $2,100. And that will save them about $54, just under $55 on their monthly mortgage payment. We'll help if just a little fewer people, around 13. If we do bump that up to 10%, which would be lovely, but if we run through all of those figures, we're not helping as many people. So with that, 5% is what we would recommend, just kind of a nice sweet spot. And we don't have to provide 5% for everybody. It can just be up to that. So depending on the situation, it's just not required that we do that. So we're hoping that once this program is successful, we'd like to make this an annual revolving fund for the affordable housing community. And we'd also, assuming things go really well, we'd like to propose a secondary fund for the attainable buyers up to 120% AMI, again, using funds from our attainable housing fund. So questions for you guys, Chrissy, if you could go ahead and slide down just a little bit. Is there how do you guys think about the maximum amount that can be borrowed? I know that we're recommending $40,000, but, we could go lower if, you guys think that. Any thoughts on the percentage for the down payment assistance or the structure of it being, wholly deferred versus monthly payments? We just want to get your feedback and see if you guys have any questions or concerns before we move forward to a bigger audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Can you enlarge it just a little bit bigger? Perfect, thank you.
I have a question on, is that okay?
Sure.
So I guess my first question, so the 2,000, is that, and the 2% on the percentage, are they together? I mean, are they additive, or is the 2,000 like, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So they have to have at least $2,000 of their own money to put in. So and then the assistance itself will go towards their down payment, towards their home, and it'll cover any closing costs. So that's going to cover their loan origination fees and all of that other stuff that comes up at the closing table that most folks don't expect. But yeah, they have to have at least some of their own money into it.
Okay. And then my second one, on option 2, it's sort of a bullet, like it's an interest only until the end. They don't have to make any principal payments.
Yeah, so it's a deferred payment. So it's essentially a grant with interest. So they don't ever make a payment. And then when they go to sell the home again, at the end of their, time living there, that's when payment is due to the city with that interest, depending on the number of years that they've been there.
So because you say it's going to be like revolving, right? So you can, but if they're not paying principal, you have nothing to revolve back, right?
They would be paying the principal plus the interest. It's just the city wouldn't get our money back until they sell the home. But it would still be a revolving loan fund over time.
But if nobody's paying, unless some people are paying principal, right? You don't have anything to use for a new loan. I guess that's my point. Like if if everyone has to pay principal, then you have money coming in and you can make new loans.
Yeah, everyone would still pay the principal. It's just a matter of when the city's getting the payment back that we're kind of considering is, do we want folks to make monthly payments, or do we want the loan to be deferred until they sell?
And Christy, here, I know Crystal has a hand up, but let me try and. So this is gonna be coming from the Affordable Housing Fund. So even if folks don't pay their principal, if you feel that this pilot program is after the year or so, however long if you get the outcomes you're seeking, you could always request more funding from the Affordable Housing Fund to continue it, right? So it wouldn't necessarily end if people aren't paying until it sells. You just have to be drawing from the Affordable Housing Fund to, if you feel that this program is successful and you want to continue it. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
so the idea is we asked council for a starting pot of $250,000 for this year to help, up to, based on the math here, just under 20 folks. And our assumption is that there will be a lot of demand, especially with the house pad project coming online next year. So our assumption is that if we get the green light from council, we will loan out all $250,000. And then next year for 2025, we would go back and request additional money to continue the program and potentially grow it. And eventually we'll see that 250,000 back. It's just, if we go with the deferred method, which is what staff's recommending, we might not see some of those payments for a few years because we really want folks, to stay in their homes. And then when they're ready to sell, they'll cut the city a check for whatever their amount was, whether it was, $15,000 or $20,000 plus the interest. So it will be a bit of delayed gratification to you all to the affordable housing loan, but we see a lot of benefit in administrative tasks, frankly, for our team, processing a lot of monthly payments, and also knowing that these folks are below 80% AMI. Just the burden of having to make those monthly payments versus paying off the loan when they sell their home and hopefully they have equity in it. We see it as more attainable for the home buyers to just make the payment at the end rather than worrying about supporting our payments with cash flow, if that makes sense. But go ahead, Crystal. You've had your hand up.
Crystal, are you there?
Sorry, it took me a minute to find my mute button. I had to slide. So I think that's a wonderful idea. I'm all about supporting first-time home buyers. And I think the 40,000, I think that's great. I think it will help them with their overall payment monthly to be reduced. I love the deferred idea because my question before you answered the question about deferment and what that meant was going to be, okay, well, then they get the loan and then they get their mortgage. How much on top of that mortgage is this additional loan going to be from the city? And, is that feasible for some of these families? So I love the idea that they can defer until they sell, which many will, because they're kind of getting into their first home, but not their forever home. I guess a couple questions I had, and I'm like drawing a blank here, I'm going to have to get back to you on some of my questions because I had some, but I'm not thinking about them right now. I can't remember what I was going to say, but overall, I really love the idea of the 40. And then I think too, like, if someone doesn't need the 40,000, like, surely you guys will offer, what you can, but a majority of these households probably are going to need that max amount down. So I'm all for the program and I'm all for revisiting it as well after the year's up to see what can be improved, right? And what works well. So that's my input for tonight.
Thank you. I do just want to clarify that it's 5% of the sales price of the home. So not everybody would necessarily be getting $40,000 like across the board. It's going to be a percentage of what their home is, what the sales price is.
That was my other question. You just reminded me. Thank you.
Okay.
So with that being said, are you guys capping it at that 315 sales price? Like, do they have to find a home within that sale price to qualify for this program?
No, so the way that we have it currently proposed, is that there's technically no cap on the sales price itself. It's just that our max down payment assistance we're proposing at 40,000, and there is some really fun, complicated math that Katie and Kayleen put into this on the back end that puts in our AMI levels of the buyers, our max sales prices, that compute out for those AMI levels with knowing general like insurance costs, HOA costs, and then credit scores. And then this 319 was just an example of a product that will be offered as part of the house pad project to see kind of like a more real world number. But we're not proposing a max sales price, but the maximum home price that these buyers will be looking at will be naturally limited by their ability to qualify for a high mortgage, if that makes sense, because they're income qualified. That will naturally, they're not going to be able to qualify for $1 million home at 80% AMI. So we decided not to arbitrarily set a max sales price because the math will just kind of set itself when folks go to qualify for mortgage. Katie, let me know if
No, you've
did
got
I
it.
explain that okay?
No, you did perfect. Thanks.
I'm looking at my they have some complicated charts on the back end that fed into all this that I'm looking at, and there's a lot of math involved.
The only thing I would
Christy, you did
add is that the base price for those is based on what's actually selling currently in the city. So it's based, it's based off of real numbers that we're seeing people closing on right now. Sorry, go ahead, Keeling.
I was just going to add, Christy did a great job explaining what's happening behind the calculator on the back end.
Mike, you have your hand raised. Mike, did you have something to say or ask?
You're muted, Mike, if you're talking. Oh,
Can you hear me?
yeah, now you can. Yeah, you muted and then you unmuted. So yeah, we can hear you now.
I see. Yeah, I could see the city's like a bank in a way. And I could see you're loaning some funding to those who have lower AMI. So one of the concerns I would have, you got two ways to look at this. One, what if the person buying this property, damages the property, and the value is going to be less. Say they bought it for 319, but it's only worth, say 300,000. And then say they go bankrupt, or say they pass away. I'm just looking at, those who have the funds. I hate for them to get damaged more. This is a worst case scenario. There could be other ends. The property value could increase. The person can upgrade the property to so great. I'm just looking at the other end, another dimension on this. So how would that affect, the funding for Longmont or this housing?
Yeah, so those are good questions. So people, like you said, people do foreclose, people do die. Everyone does. There's any number of things could happen. We could have another 500-year flood. It happens. As far as the prices and the condition of the home, there's an environmental assessment as part of the application process. Once they're actually under contract, they have to have an inspection on the home. The city has to come through and require that certain things are updated before the sale of the home. So if they're getting ready to sell the home again, and that buyer is another affordable housing buyer, those things in the home are going to have to be replaced before that next transfer can take place. So I know that that doesn't necessarily like require, I think, more of the behavior in their home that you might be asking about, but there's not much we can do about that. We can require that when they go to sell it again to another affordable buyer, that it meet a certain standard so that it is livable and it's, you know, not a crummy place to live.
Yeah, thanks. And I would just add in
okay.
foreclosure, you know, if there was a foreclosure and the bank, because these are loans, so the city of Longmont will have a deed on the property and a promissory note. If the bank has to assume ownership of the home because it's foreclosed on, then the bank would pay us our loan back. So we would still recapture the funds regardless. Obviously, it's unfortunate when anyone forecloses on a home, and that's another benefit of tying in the Boulder County personal finance housing counseling that we have folks go through for our programs. Is it's really great tailored advice on, especially for first time home buyers, on like, what does home ownership mean? How do you set up your budget? How do you have sinking funds for reserves for inevitably when major upgrades are needed for your house? And so we do see a real impact of those counseling services, and they also have foreclosure prevention specific counseling as part of their offerings if folks are in danger of foreclosure. So we would, if we are made aware of that by someone that has received down payment assistance, we would certainly direct them towards that personal finance coaching to try to get them any resources they may need. But in terms of the funds, even in a foreclosure, we would get our loan back. The bank would pay us back. Yeah. I think Cassie's had her hand up for a while, and I'm not meaning to take over facilitation from you, Chair. So feel free.
No, thank you, Christy.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, thanks. So first of all, I mean, I think it's a great program, and I mean, home ownership is really, really important. So I really like that. But I used to do subprime mortgages, and if people didn't even make a small, like if they didn't contribute and build their equity, they were less likely to take good care of their house. And also, if they have to pay a little bit of principal, they're building equity, and it helps them move up sort of financially. It's a really important thing. So even I think if you could, and obviously, I mean, you're running the program, and I know like administratively, you don't want to do monthly, but even if maybe like once a year, like there was one program I saw where they did it sort of after April 15th because people got tax rebates. I don't know if that's your client base, but I guess so. I would think a small amount, either once a year, or even every 2 years, and build some equity would be better for everyone involved. That's my spiel. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the Boulder County Down Payment Assistance Plan for people 60 to 80% AMI does require monthly payments, and anybody 60 and below does not. So that's how that program splits people up. With the gentleman who closed earlier this year, one of the things that he and I are struggling with right now, he's already, he's July now, so he's making his second payment. He wants to do electronic payments, and the city doesn't have a way to capture money electronically, and that's how most everybody banks now. So that's just one, not a huge hiccup. Like people do write checks still, they can throw them in the mail, he can come to the window. But if that's not how people are planning to bank these days, like we don't have a way to, we're not a more modern office, again, because we're really not a bank, even though we're kind of acting like one. So that's just one very minor thing, but it is a thing that's, hindering our current buyer. So it's not just the administrative burden on a monthly basis. It's also like what's going to be easier on folks on a regular basis. If it's behaviorally too much of a pain and they have to come in and make their payments, and I guess our concern is that they might not, just because of that. It's, the path of least resistance to me is if we can't make it as easy as what they might be expecting, then if it's deferred, we know that we'll get it back at some point.
I had a really quick question about that. In terms of deferring the payments, does that reduce your ability to help the same number of buyers moving forward, since home prices will continue to rise? It seems like your buying power to assist people in this program will decrease. So is that anticipated in the?
Yes, there's two different answers for that. So the first is yes, home prices are going to rise. You know, assuming that this program is successful and years out, you know, in 5 years, if we've asked for that same 250,000 per year, we've got 1.25 available over that 5 years, right? The average length of home ownership right now is just over 4 years. So I anticipate that, you know, folks will start selling their homes within that time frame. In reviewing, you know, the length of some of our down payment assistance loans in years previously, we had some people as soon as 2 years later were selling their home. For what reason, I don't know, but they were selling again. So they didn't get a chance to build a whole lot of equity. And that's their business, you know. Other folks will stay longer. The nice thing is that this isn't typically a group that forecloses, you know, unless there's a major market upset. So most of these folks, when they are here for the long term, you know, they're here within the city, you know, participating, which is great.
Great, thank you. Mike, did you still have a question, or is Crystal, is your hand still raised? I'm not able to see everybody right now.
Mike still has his hands up, but I don't know if he's asking a question or already answered.
No, I think you've answered my question. Thank you.
And Crystal, I saw your hand raised earlier. Did you still have a question?
Yeah, I just had a comment. I think being that I'm in the field of work that I'm in, and I'm constantly reviewing like people's budgets with them to approve them for rental assistance and stuff. With the way that the rental prices are going, I mean, a lot of these people are paying high rental rates anyways that are going to be fairly somewhat consistent with these mortgage payments that they're going to be paying anyways. So it just seems like a no-brainer to me. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because before it used to be, you know, mortgages were like twice as much as the rent would be in the city and in the county. But now even affordable units are, you know, in the 2,200, 2,400, and that's affordable. That's not market rate. So, and I'm running into a lot of like people who are, you know, very well at budgeting, very well at, you know, doing their finances, and who are responsible, and their rents just keep going up. And the question I always have in the back of my head is like, why aren't you putting this money into equity into your own home? Why aren't you purchasing your own home with the rate of rent that you're paying where you're at right now? And so I think I think it's a risk, but you know, we have to do risky things to make change, right? Because change is not going to happen by being like, you know, super logical and safe and protective of, you know, what could happen here and what can happen there. I think with the damage that's been done overall to some of these populations of people, and their lack of access to, you know, resources, I think, you know, taking a chance on some of these homeowners is important. So yeah, it was just a comment I had.
So I have some questions for ACI staff on the resource side. One is, could this be stacked with, for example, so we fund through the Housing Human Services Advisory Board, we fund the PI program, which also does down payment assistance as part of one of the things that they do. This will not limit folks to saying that they can't access that type of program, correct? So they could stack it alongside this program.
Yeah, so what we're seeing, so the plan is that we're going to have to stack funding sources in order to get folks into homes. So I don't think that our down payment assistance program is going to be the only assistance they're getting. So our other gentleman that closed earlier this year, so he bought a home with Elevations Community Land Trust. So he had the primary mortgage with them. He had our down payment assistance and then another grant on top of that. And so, you know, when he came to the closing table, he had over $50,000 in assistance with us in that grant combined. And that's how we got him into a home, and the home was $268,000. So yes, I do expect to see folks using the PI program and a number of others.
Okay.
Allie, Berto, I'll just say, one of the wonderful things about us having our own local down payment assistance program is that it doesn't have us stacking funding sources. Sometimes there was risk or concern that the home dollars that we were receiving from the state mirrored the home dollars that the PI program was receiving, or some of the programs that Boulder County had as sources. So because we can't stack federal dollars on top of each other. So this would help eliminate some of that risk.
Okay. And then one more question, I see Mike has his hand up. Assuming that, you know, it's up to 80% AMI, but they can't, it's between, just want to make sure between 60 and 80% AMI, right? Because I'm wondering about one of the places where PI was most successful is working with Habitat and combining those. And so I'm assuming, but Habitat, I'm not sure if they go to 80 or they're between 60 and 80. I forget exactly what their income limits are.
Habitat generally serves up to 60.
They're
Okay,
they're
so-
trying to keep it at 60. They can go up to 80, but
Oh, Molly's here too. You know,
yeah,
Molly's
sorry
here.
about that. I'm here. They have told us that they see a challenge in keeping prices at 60% and AMI and below in the future if they have to, they're kind of running out of people that are donating land rather than having to buy land and compete with other landowner buyers. So goal is 60 for sure.
Okay, so then somebody at 60 wouldn't qualify for this, right? Because you want 60 to 80 here, right?
No, I don't think we have a minimum.
No, there's no intent to exclude anyone below 80. I think when we're just looking at the math, unless they are in a Habitat home, realistically, people at 60% and below are not probably going to qualify for any available homes in Longmont. But no, they wouldn't be excluded from the program. It's just a matter of like what's actually available in the market that they could use this for.
And we know that we just funded through our affordable housing, or we funded a bunch of Habitat projects that'll be coming up hopefully the next couple of years. So yeah, all right, those are my questions. So, okay.
Yeah, how this could play with Habitat is a really good point. And I know that their mortgage product is very unique because they have their own in-house lending as part of Habitat. And so what we will probably do is, assuming we get a green light from council on this, is to meet with Dave and others from St. Vrain Habitat to get a better sense of how this program works with their financing, because I know their, you know, Habitat customers aren't going out and getting traditional mortgages.
See, Mike has his hand up.
Yes, I'm looking at those with the lower AMI. At least in my world, I was at Home Depot the other day, and we wanted to upgrade an air conditioner. And before COVID, you can buy an air conditioner for maybe $3,000-4,000. Now, someone I talked to, the bid is like $12,000 to $17,000 for an air conditioner, and he got a high bid for $44,000 for an air conditioner. And you just have here that if a person has assets of $25,000 or more, that's too much. I think that's too low. I mean, if someone buys a property, they're 100% responsible for it. And if they can't afford to buy a new air conditioner after it breaks down, they're not going to have air conditioning, or maybe it's a furnace. So I think that, you know, if someone's renting property, the landlord's responsible for it. So they can, you know, get the air conditioner or get a new furnace for that person. So I'm just looking at that as these people are going to be 100% responsible, and are they going to be qualified? I doubt it, but that's my view.
Well, I would assume that the hope is that as folks get into, not everybody, but that their income potential will also grow, right? Because we're not going to be doing yearly income qualification, right?
No. Yeah, once they're qualified and they're in the home, their income can,
But Mike
Go
makes
on.
yeah, I mean, it's a good
Indefinitely.
point that Mike makes, the other piece. I think what I will say is personal experience, the challenge with Habitat was that, let's say first of all, with Habitat, you have instant equity, right? Because the value of their mortgage is the cost of the build, and that's why they have volunteers. And so usually your mortgage is pretty low and your house is worth a lot. But because of how it's structured, it's hard to access that equity. And I'm assuming is this gonna make it, like, to Mike's point, if there is a requirement for a major investment in an upgrade or replacement of furnace or something. You know, typically folks that don't have the income, they'll use the equity in their house to cover that cost. Will this product make it harder for them to do that?
yeah, I think it's a good point, and certainly something we'll propose to council is what is that liquidation level, for lack of a better term, of like how much in liquid assets are we allowing folks to keep. Right now we have the 25K proposed because that mirrors the existing program, but I think we're open to raising that, especially you know, knowing that people need to have reserves. So that's something we'll be certainly wanting more feedback on from council. But to answer your first question, I mean, yeah, having a lien on your property does make it harder to access your equity. So at the end of the day, these are loans, and if folks want to refinance in the future or get a reverse mortgage, I mean, this will be part of that calculation.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat from Crystal, and it was already answered. I can't see the initial question though.
Would they be eligible for rehab? And Kayleen said yes.
Yes, asterisk, depending on the rehab program, yes. This would not block that though.
Yeah, this wouldn't block them being eligible for a rehab program, assuming they're still income qualified.
You raised your hand too.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting that the idea that we're discussing if a homeowner can afford repairs when we don't request the same thing of people who go with traditional mortgages. So I just think it's important not to be discriminatory, just because there's maybe a perceived increased risk that may or may not be accurate. But I would hate to have a screening process that imposes an additional burden in regards to the ability to cover the normal expenses as a homeowner.
Yeah, and to be clear, the folks that will apply to us for DPA will all have traditional mortgages. We are requiring a 30-year fixed mortgage such that, so anyone coming to us seeking this help with this program will have to already be pre-qualified for a mortgage. But yeah,
the scrutiny around reserves, which doesn't happen in other situations when it's just a traditional mortgage.
Yeah, I agree. Your point is well taken.
That's true. Jeffrey asked the question, is creating an emergency fund part of the financial literacy? I took it, yeah, of course it is. The question is, can you? Do you have the cash flow to do it? But yeah, it's definitely part of the training. Yeah, it is a topic. I took that one. It was 12 years ago when I took it.
Yeah, we can always check in with them. I would be shocked if it wasn't though, because that's a pretty foundational personal finance topic for renters and for homeowners.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
So-
that's just my point, is that that's part of, I mean, to Michael's point, that's part of the homeownership model, is you're responsible for upkeep and maintenance. And if that's part of what they're learning as they acquire their first home, just like all of us that were lucky enough to acquire a first home, they're going to be learning just like everybody else is. So it's no different in that way from anybody purchasing their first home.
Yeah, thanks. Just to go back to our questions, what are thoughts on the kind of percentage recommendation for down payment assistance? And this really dictates how many potential households we can serve. Right now, staff's recommending 5% with this initial $250,000 pilot program. What are some board members' thoughts on that? Does that feel right? It's kind of what we felt was a good sweet spot between providing meaningful assistance in terms of a meaningful enough dollar amount, but also serving, you know, it's always good to have a double digit. It feels better to have a double digit number of folks that could be served, I guess, rather than just a handful. But what are your reactions to that?
I have just clarification of 5%. Is that what they're putting down, or?
So that would be
What is-
of the sales price
that they have to come up with?
that our program would provide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they have to come up with at least 2,000. Is that right, Katie? Yeah, of their
Yep.
own cash, and then the DPA percentage would be our this program's contribution based on the price of the home.
So the more the city chips in, the fewer people you can serve in any given year. So I think you're spot on. It's the kind of middle of the road, and it sounds like there's $250,000 guaranteed in 2024, but I think I heard Katie say the hope is that you'll get another 250 next year, and another 250 the year after. So this is the first year of a multi-year program. My only concern about the 5% being a little too high is who gets left out. Do you have any idea how many people are going to apply for this? And I guess if you don't have enough funding this year, the hope is that you'll have funding next year for them. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so my plan is to once, if we get the approval, to send out an invitation to everyone who's applied recently and ask them to apply again. Since the odds are really high that all of their documents will have expired and all have old information, they would have to resubmit all new statements and things like that. But what I'd like to have, let's say at least half of them, that's 10 applications that come in, 12 really. If we have 12 people apply who already applied this year to our Boulder County Down Payment Assistance Program, there's probably 4 in that group that I thought we were going to get approved for that program that didn't, based on, really tiny things right at the end that, unfortunately made them ineligible for it.
Yeah, and just to add on, we always have the potential to ask for more money next year. We just asked for 250 for this first year, but we could come back and propose $500,000 next year if we wanted to, and we feel like the program's been popular. So that is to be determined, but we're not limited beyond this first year.
Thank you. Described this as a pilot program earlier today. So it does seem like that, if we could demonstrate a lot of success, if the more buyers we can serve in a meaningful way this first year, the more likely council would be willing to support this in the future.
You're thinking like a grant program manager, Jeffrey.
Yeah, been there.
Yeah, showing the demand is always helpful. So that's where we landed, but yeah, happy to hear thoughts. And then obviously we'll hear council's thoughts on that percentage number also, which drives how many people we could serve. Any other final thoughts or questions?
Cassie has a question.
Well, no, actually, since you were asking for feedback, the work you did, I think the numbers you came up with are good. So that's my only feedback.
Mike,
Thank
did you
you.
have a question or comment?
Yeah, this is Mike. 5% is really pretty beneficial for anybody. A lot of the down payments I've seen are 20%. So 5% is very beneficial. So you're trying to help people out, and it's my bad feedback.
Thank you.
I just want to say I'm happy to see that Longmont is kind of taking the initiative to branch off of the original program, so that way more people could qualify. So I'm really excited to see this and this change and what it's going to develop into. I think if there's a need, there's a will, there's a way. And so I think that the funding will come for sure. And yeah, I'm excited to see what's going to be made of it a couple years down the road.
Thank you. Always appreciate your visionary thinking, Crystal. Yeah, we're very grateful to council that they gave us, they gave us the line item. Obviously, we still have to present the actual, how the program's gonna work, but the 250 is secured, which is very exciting. Well, thank you all. I know. I took good notes from our conversation today, and we'll go back and keep working on this. And our plan is to take this outline with maybe a little bit more detail to City Council at a study session on August 6th. So if anyone has any other thoughts or comments before that, feel free to reach out to staff, but that will be our next step for this program. Oh, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I just had one thought. Interest rates are pretty high right now. So if they go back 3 years from now and get a lower interest rate loan, does that mean they have to pay back the city's loan at that point?
Good question. So we do have a subordination policy that will probably apply to this program as well. So we have traditionally subordinated if folks want to refinance to a better interest rate. So we'll just put our loan behind their new mortgage, or they can pay it off. It's up to them. But we do an analysis to make sure, you know, they're not getting into a bad refi or predatory refi situation. But we quite often subordinate our loans so that they can refinance in the future. I just did paperwork for one today.
But that refi wouldn't trigger the requirement for them to pay the city back at that point.
I mean, we haven't drafted our, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I don't envision that. That's not a requirement with the Boulder County program. I do have a note that they would have access to equity if they wanted to refinance or use that equity for something. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the specific verbiage, but there are restrictions that are like city requirements on how they can use equity. So like it's a major medical issue or like a true emergency, they can't just go refi because they want to go on vacation, although that sounds like a great plan. So there are
for cash out, we do have policies.
There are requirements there. Yeah, but if whether they refinance for a lower rate just to adjust the terms or for whatever other reason, they are able to refinance their primary.
Yeah, we do have policies about cash out refinances where if they're going to do a big pull out a bunch of equity, in order for them to not pay us back at that time, it needs to be for a list of certain reasons. But in general, our policy intent is to not preclude folks from refinancing to get better interest rate terms. And we certainly want folks to stay in their homes. So we have some, you know, that's what our attorneys help us with and all those subordination agreements and stuff like that. But that's not our intent with this program, is to make that be a barrier. Because hopefully interest rates won't be crazy forever. That's what we're all telling ourselves. So.
I'm not sure the recording picks up chats, but Crystal had asked about Brenda sending out the date of the study session, and Brenda will do that for the whole board. She'll send out a date, so. Just want to make sure that we get it on the recording. You know, I think it does pick it up, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, our plan right now is to go to the study session on August 6th. We haven't prepared our materials for council yet. Obviously wanted to be informed by tonight's conversation. But unless something changes with timing, it should be on the 6th at their.
We'll send that out to the board once it's on the docket for that date.
Right, the packet will be ready the Friday before, am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, one more thing. I just want to say thank you for taking our ideas, even though you didn't need them, and we weren't voting on anything tonight. I appreciate you folks like coming in and getting the different perspectives and inputs on the program and recommendations. And so thank you for allowing us to be a part of this process.
Thank you for your feedback. It's really valuable to us. And as housing policy nerds, it's really, really cool to be able to have local funds to create a program, because as grateful as we are for our federal funds from lovely HUD, they do come with a lot of strings attached that can make it hard to actually use the funds most effectively. So anytime we get to do a project with local funds and kind of get to set our own parameters, it's very refreshing, but there's a lot of decisions that have to be made. So thank you for your time tonight in giving us all your feedback. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
All right, so I think it's my turn. And I will talk about, we have 3 site visit reports, and if any of you have any questions for the agencies, I can always send them, but I'll go over these pretty quickly, because some of these agencies have been funded for a long time and they are well established, and so they have put in a lot of work in making sure that they're doing as many best practices as possible. So I'm gonna start, I think if we go back to the agenda, I think the first one is, we can go back up, Brenda, please. Okay, so I know what I'm saying, okay. So Boulder Valley Women's Center, it actually, they changed their name now, it's Boulder Valley Health Center. Just so you know, they removed the women's, because they wanna work with all sorts of folks. I met with them last couple of weeks ago. It was a really good meeting, of course, because they receive federal funding. As far as the debt audit is concerned, they had all the policies and procedures that they need to have. They have a really robust patient grievance policy. We even talked about it a little bit. They have all sorts of protections and confidentiality for their clients. They follow all those rules. So what we ended up talking about was really a couple of things. One is the challenges they're having to finding a location here in Longmont, because they gave up their location a while back. And also some of the Title 10 funding they're having, so they're losing, so they're looking at how to work that. But overall, I mean, they are really wanting to have a location here in Longmont. They had found a location, but it fell through because the location ended up renting it out because they were still in negotiations. They ended up renting it out to someone else. So they're still looking for a location here in Longmont. The other thing they're doing is they're really trying to work on their outcomes. We had a really good conversation about that because they have a new development director. And when she met with her executive director, they weren't totally sure how the previous year's contracts and their outcomes and how they were tracking that. So they're taking a really good look at that to try and improve that. But I think just as far as the work they're doing, the challenge is folks have to go to Boulder, right? But they are working with folks in Longmont. They're providing the educational resources. They gave me some numbers. And I'm gonna see if I can read my own handwriting. Part of the problem is sometimes I can't understand my own handwriting. But they did give me some numbers. 395 students they've worked with so far this year. And some of the like I said, what they're working on is the trying to get back into Longmont. That's their big project. They want to be here. They've talked to Salud. The other big challenge that they've had in the past, and I know this because I've been around for a while, is they had a challenge keeping staff. And so the board and the ED did some really good work at looking at their job descriptions, and they've actually created there was a disconnect between the folks that were up front, administratively receiving patients, and then the folks that were working their CNAs in the back. So they created a new position called the clinical assistants, and there's a lot of cross training in that to make sure that they have that communication, to make sure that folks that show up are served well. So that's something that they're pretty excited about, because they feel that that'll help with their staffing issues, because a few years ago, they were really struggling to keep staff. And of course, you know, inflation is always a challenge, and competition for medical staff. The medical staff are always in demand. So that's part of the challenge. But yeah, overall, I felt that they're doing a great job and they're looking really hard to try and get back into Longmont. I told them about Hope Light Clinic and saying, you know, is there potential you can work with them, or and again, they've talked to Salud. They're just trying to find a way to get back in here. So that's Boulder Valley Health Center.
Do you know if they're still providing abortion services?
They are. And actually, we talked about that, and I asked them, hey, are you seeing folks like from, you know, all what happened with the you know, Supreme Court and what's happened in Texas and others? And they said, yeah, they're seeing some, but what's really happening is folks are just going all over Colorado. They're not, you know, they're not unique. They're going to Denver, they're going to Longmont. Folks are just trying to wherever they can get in from other states. So yeah, they are still doing abortions. And that's, you know, that's definitely one of the things that they're seeing is they are folks that are coming from out of state to use their services.
And are they allowed access to students in St. Vrain or only Boulder Valley?
No, these are all
Those
same.
are St.
No,
okay,
these are
great.
same grade students, yeah.
Nice,
I asked them specifically, yeah, these are all, the 395 are same grade students,
nice.
so. I don't know if anybody has any questions about that site visit. Okay?
Nope.
Oh,
No, sorry, I said no.
okay, all right. Immigrant Legal Center, this was an interesting visit. So Immigrant Legal Center has been around for a long time, and they're a small nonprofit in the sense of, you know, small staff, whereas, you know, Boulder Valley Health Center is a pretty large nonprofit with lots of folks that work there. They have all sorts of back office support. And so Immigrant Legal Center is kind of the opposite. They have like 4 staff, but they do great work. But when I did their desk audit, I kind of wrote notes that they really still work like very much. Even though they've been around for a long time, they're very much a grassroots type of organization, right? They own their own building, they own their own building, their own office, which is great. It's in Boulder. But you know, part of their challenge, and Laurel was pretty upfront with me about how hard it is to do our grants because they are a small staff and they don't get a ton of money. I did tell Laurel, hey Laurel, we don't tell you how much to ask for, you know. But so yeah, she was pretty upfront with me about the challenges of doing a desk audit because they're small, and they got a lot of stuff going on. We did talk about some of the influx that they're seeing from you know, Venezuela and they are seeing some of that work come up. They talked about you know, the biggest challenge they have is how backed up and how much the federal government changes things on them and they have to react and respond to it. And so that's challenging for them. They have to keep up with all the different maneuvers and twists that the federal government does. And so, but they're still working with folks in Longmont. They've always worked with folks in Longmont, and yeah, overall they're doing what they've always done. They're a small nonprofit. They still run they're still pretty grassroots. And I said I understand it's a challenge because, you know, Longmont asks for a lot more than what City of Boulder or Boulder County does, and I told her the reason we do that is we just want to make sure that we support our nonprofits at continuing to raise that level of you know, just continue to improve the nonprofit and make sure they're following best practices. But it was a really good conversation. It is definitely a challenge for the work they do because again, they're dealing with situations where federal government makes changes, folks don't know what they're supposed to do, and sometimes they make mistakes. Or like you talked about, there's still issues with the notarios, where they'll go to somebody claiming that they're immigrant, you know, they can help with their immigrant documentation, and they mess up. And so now they have to come in and try and deal with that situation. That continues to be an issue that they deal with. So overall, I mean, they're doing what they've always done, and yeah, it was a spirited conversation. Not sure if anybody has any questions on Immigrant Legal Center.
I don't see any.
Alright. Voices for Children I really enjoyed Voices for Children, that was a really good conversation. They are aware, their biggest challenge is, and we had a really good conversation, and if the board has any ideas, so the reality is, they gave me some good numbers, you know. The vast majority of their volunteer are not people of color, they tend to be retired, older white folks, and yet a good portion, you know, still the majority of people they work with are the dominant culture, but they still work with, they said they had, like, for example, this year so far, they have served 34 Latino kids. And they are racking their brains and they are reaching out everywhere to try and find CASA volunteers that are, you know, BIPOC, Latino community, so that the kids that are working there see someone that looks like themselves, right? So that they can have that connection. And so we had a really good conversation about the recruitment strategies, what they're trying to do, how are they, you know, so that was a really good conversation. And they're very committed to it. They really want to make sure that the kids they're working with, you know, feel comfortable with the volunteers. And and then we talked about their outcomes too. We talked about, they have some really interesting outcomes, but I think we talked about how to make them stronger. We had a good conversation about, so for example, 76% of youth, one of their outcomes, they said 76% of youth have regular primary care provider. And I said, well, that's great, but it doesn't really tell us what difference you made. So I think for an example, I said, what you need to do is you need to think about when they first come into your program, do you do an intake? And so let's say that only 25% of let's say you work with 100 kids and only 25 of them have a primary care provider, and then because of working with you, now 76 of them do. See, I said that's the kind of data that you want to share, like, you know, because there you can clearly demonstrate that because of their working with your CASA volunteer and the advocacy that CASA volunteer has done, that child has been connected with a primary care provider. So those are the kinds of things that we talked about. So far this year, they've served between, not just Longmont, but they've served 204 total children, and they have had 115 of those were those in Longmont, and they've gotten 29 new volunteers. Again, because it's these larger agencies that have you know, CASA is a federally recognized program, and they have a lot of requirements that on the desk audit side, they do what they need to do, right? They have their policies and their procedures, their employee manual. They have an amazing volunteer manual. I commended them on their volunteer manual, but they need it because of the kind of work that a CASA volunteer does is pretty intense. And you need to go through some intense training to do that. So that was, I really did appreciate their volunteer manual. It was pretty comprehensive. Crystal, you have a question?
Just more of a comment. I've seen the CASA representatives in court representing students who are part of truancy when I did my internship last year with St. Vrain, and it is a wonderful program. I couldn't imagine what these kiddos would do without the advocacy and representation that they have through CASA. So yeah, I'm hearing everything that you're saying, and I'm like agreeing with you 100%, Aliberto.
Yeah. So again, what's interesting, a lot of the conversations that I've had lately with folks has been about how can the city help you improve how you share your outcomes? So for example, it's not part of the site visit schedule, but I did a training along with Boulder County and City of Boulder around the application and the outcomes, and the in-between reached out to me. And I'm gonna be doing, like I talked to the board about training in September. Crystal's gonna be there. I'm just excited that there our nonprofits are really beginning to feel like the need to better tell their story through outcomes. We want to keep that qualitative data, we wanna keep the stories, for sure, those are super important. But how do we better tell you all, as they read your applications, hey, look at what, this is how we can we can, you know, show you, demonstrate to you the value of our work in Longmont and Boulder County. So most of my site visits have been focused on that, and I have really appreciated that, because all the agents are doing great work. I just want to help them tell that story better through outcome data. So yeah, I've been pretty, you know, like I said, the Immigrant Legal Center, that was an interesting conversation, because yeah, they're saying, you know, we don't get a ton of money from Longmont. I told them, you know, we don't, I wish we had all the money in the world, but we don't. It's limited resources and it is competitive. And I told the same thing to all the agencies. You gotta understand that it's gonna be a competitive year, and in order to be competitive, that's part of improving your outcomes, improving your how you tell your story. So, but that's been part of my conversations with all of the nonprofits that I've done site visit, is it be ready for a competitive year. So, and that's all I got.
Any additional comments or questions? Are you doing these by yourself? With
For the most part, you guys, you know, I mean, yeah, for the most part, I'm doing these by myself.
Okay.
And in one way, that's good too, because like, we get really deep into like, you know, we'll get into questions around the we'll talk about the application, we'll talk, so they feel confident asking me about our policies and how we work as a city in the funding, and so that's been pretty you know, useful for me to learn more about what they're thinking. It'd be great if board members could join, but I also know that folks are busy and that's a challenge, so I don't mind doing it on my own. And again, I think that because of that, we really sometimes get into the nuts and bolts of how they're doing their work.
Sounds like they're benefiting.
Oh,
from
yeah.
it.
Yeah, so yeah, Crystal's asking to if Brenda can share, yeah, Brenda, we can share the site visit schedule. What's the challenge, we tried to do, like, for example, I think when I did Boulder Valley, we did them all in one. Like, I did it all in one day, like I was out of the office the whole day. We wanted to kind of do that, but the challenge that we've been having is folks have had to reschedule, right? So like we had several one day and people had to now I'm gonna be smaller chunks of time at different dates because folks they had stuff going on. Yeah. So yeah, so Brenda can share that out. I guess the last thing is, and I just reminded the Longmont Community Foundation Board this morning about the training that's happening on July 24th. So what's really cool about this training is, and if you want to go down to the agenda, and this is what I told the Longmont Community Foundation Board, I'll tell you all the same thing, is that the way that this agenda came out was out of that survey that we sent you all. And we were, as staff, we were very specific to tell folks, you know, if there is something you're really interested in. So for example, let's say you feel that you know enough about affordable housing that you don't need to show up for the 101. Then come at 4:15 and learn about funding and finance, right? Or come whatever you're most interested in, or if the only thing you're really interested in is housing and land policy, show up at 6:15 and get the training on that. It was really meant to be segmented, so you can come for all of it, or you can come for the whatever you are most interested in. And we're gonna have snacks and food. It's gonna be at the same parade. I don't know how many folks are gonna show up. I know, like I said, we have 17 board members on the Longmont Community Foundation, but I'm not sure if they're all gonna show up or just some. But I think it'll be great for you all to meet them as well. This Community Foundation does a lot in the city in Longmont as well. So just, I'm excited about the 24th, so.
It's great.
Yeah. All right. So any other announcements? Questions? Oh, go ahead, Jeffrey.
I just wanted to thank you for pulling that together. I'm gonna miss it, unfortunately. I'm gonna be out of town, but it sounds like an incredible educational opportunity, and I know that pulling programs like that together take a lot of time and effort, and if I'm reading this correctly, it sounds like you've got some other entities that may be participating in the training, so thanks for
Well,
doing that, I really appreciate it.
We'll see, Jeffrey, if Brenda, I'm not sure if we've already put out the notice for it, usually when we have a meeting like this, that's not recorded like we're recording. Like when we had our community engagement, Longmont Public Media came and recorded it. So they may come out and record this one as well, so it might be on our YouTube page.
And kudos
I
to
can check
Christy
in.
Wiseman for the
Yes.
contact.
Yes, it was Christy who made the first contact, and really appreciate her work on this, but I'm really excited. I think it'll be a good learning session for folks that want to know more about just the whole affordable housing world.
Yeah, I'm really glad we're able to take advantage of it. Whenever I can pull, it's not really pulling strings because it's a program available to any city, but I did work at DOLA, so it was easy to send that email. And I just wanted to add that we also invited staff from the planning department, especially to come for that housing and land use policy piece. So you might see other city staff in addition to HCI staff and human services staff there. But I'm also very excited for it.
So Chair, I don't think we have anything else on this.
So we'll motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion.
I second.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Bye, everyone, have a good
See you
night.
all moving down
Bye.
24th.
Thank you. We'll see you on the 24th.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye.
So.